Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Moving with MS virtual support group. If you are brand new, a special welcome to you as a first-time attendee. This is something, gosh, especially now that it's 2025, it's something that I've been offering along with MS Views and News for at least 3 years. Oh my gosh, it might even be 4 years at this point. But if you are brand new, you might not know who I am. I'm Dr. Gretchen Hawley, a physical therapist and multiple sclerosis certified specialist, and I partner with MS Views and News to run this Moving with MS virtual support group. So it's designed to have everyone join virtually through GoToMeeting, and I share a topic that in some way, shape, or form relates to my world of expertise, which is physical therapy for multiple sclerosis. You are more than welcome to ask questions throughout the entire time. It's a pretty laid back environment, and each month we have a different topic. Today's topic is, I love starting the new year with this topic, it's neuroplasticity and functional exercise. If this is a brand new brand new concept, brand new words to you, your mind might be blown. There is a specific way to exercise to get the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to movement and actually getting stronger and walking better when you have MS. And that's what we're going to be reviewing today. But even if you've heard of neuroplasticity, even if you've heard of functional exercise, it is always great to have a refresher on what those things are, because your exercises that you're doing day in and day out should be designed with neuroplasticity concepts and functional exercise principles. So whether you're brand new to this or you've heard me talk about it many times before, this is the right place for you. So thank you so much for being here. So again, I partner with MS Views and News to bring this to you. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day, whether you're tuning in live or watching the recording. Thank you for joining us. And I love hearing your questions in the chat box. This support group is for you. And so I always want to make sure that you feel like all of your questions are answered and that everything we're discussing makes sense for you. So thank you for joining, and a huge thank you to our supporter, Viatris, as well. I see Andrew says hi from Canada and says, do we exercise here too? So we typically, it's not an exercise class, it's more educational. Sometimes we have physical therapy exercise-based topics where we discuss things like strengthening exercises versus stretching, or like today's functional exercise. So I'll be demonstrating what functional exercise is and give you ideas of exercises, but it's not an exercise class where you press play and we do a full class together. Although that is a good idea for a future session. If you're interested in that, let me know and we can see if we can make that work for one of our months. Joe says, thank you from Ohio. Would like to know how to exercise with a claw hand. Yeah, so we have had previous support groups on hand strengthening and hand function, so that might be what you're looking for. All of these are recorded, and you can find all of the recordings on MS Views and News YouTube page. Carol says, I recently retired. My neurologist says I need to exercise daily or I will end up in a wheelchair. Yeah, well, this is a perfect session for you to tune into because we're going to review the basics, the foundation of exercise. I'd love to have a class. Awesome, that's good feedback. Angela says, hi from Cary. Deb from Parkland, Florida. Andrew, I don't exercise daily. Is it bad? So we'll get into that. That's actually a great segue. We'll get into exactly how frequently you should be exercising today. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and dive in. So neuroplasticity and MS-specific physical therapy, aka functional exercise. So here's just a quick recap of, or not recap, but intro of what we're going to be talking about. First and foremost, neuroplasticity. Secondly, different types of physical therapy. Third, we're going to do a few exercise demonstrations and review exercise guidelines like, should you be exercising daily? How many repetitions and sets should you be doing? And then we're going to talk about how to get access to this specific type of PT. And of course, we'll be doing a Q&A throughout. So as you can see, if you guys type any questions in there, I can stop where I'm at in the presentation and answer the questions. I do see Linda says hi from West Palm Beach, Florida. Renee also loves the idea for an exercise class as one of our sessions. Shelley from Brooklyn, she has primary progressive MS. Can all this help slow the decline? Great question. Let's dive in because we'll be answering that. Okay, so I'm curious if you've never heard of neuroplasticity before, in the chat bar area, type no if you've never heard of neuroplasticity. If you have heard of neuroplasticity and you feel like you know what it is well enough where you understand it, you could maybe even explain it to someone, type yes in the chat. And I'm just curious of where we all stand when it comes to neuroplasticity, because neuroplasticity is imperative that you understand what it is. It is the reason that someone with MS absolutely can get stronger and walk better and feel more ease in daily movements. So it's important to understand what it is and how it works so that you can implement it into your life. So I see a few people saying no, several people saying yes. Good. If you're saying yes, hopefully it's because you've been on some of our Moving with MS talks before. Dion says somewhat. A few more no's. Lori says very familiar. Awesome. Have studied it often. Is it the same as spasticity? No. Spasticity is a symptom of MS that refers to a level of muscle tightness. Neuroplasticity is separate from that. So okay, we've got a good mix here. Some yeses, some no's, some so-sos. Awesome. Okay, so let's dive into what it is, especially for those of you that said, no, you don't know what it is. Neuroplasticity is the ability of our neurons to change their function and create new pathways. And there's different types of neuroplasticity. I'm going to do a demonstration here in just a second to show you in real life world what neuroplasticity means. But I really like this graphic. I wanted to include it here because you'll see in this first graphic, it says neuroplasticity, aka brain plasticity, is the brain's ability to change and adapt. But there's two different types. Type number one is structural plasticity. So this refers to things like learning a new language. Our brain has to learn something new, and the way that it does that is by restructuring, reorganizing through practicing experiences, memories, and it changes our brain's physical structure. Typed and often you'll see this pictures with kids because this occurs heavily when we are kids, when we're babies and we're learning new things, when we're toddlers, we experience things, we're developing memories. That is a form of structural plasticity. Then we move on to type 2, which is functional plasticity. This is when brain functions move from a damaged area to an undamaged area. So with MS, both of these are occurring. However, with MS, more likely than not, we're trying to work more so on type 2, which is functional plasticity. Just to give you another example, type 1, I mentioned it might be learning a new hobby. It might be learning a new language, learning something new. Your brain has neural pathways and it needs to fire and make connections for you to remember those things and learn the skill. But when you have MS, those neural pathways can be damaged. So type 2 is more so relearning. You might have known how to walk before, but your walking is not great now because those neural pathways that were formed in type 1 are damaged. So we need to find a new way to walk better. So both of these types of neuroplasticity apply for people with MS. Another cool fact about our brain is that when we move, when we exercise and just move throughout the day, there is a protein called BDNF, the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this is a protein that supports the survival of these brain neurons. It also encourages growth of new neurons and synapses. So it basically, what that is saying is supporting the survival of existing neurons is it supports type 1 neuroplasticity. Encouraging growth of new neurons is supporting type 2. And then side note, it also helps improve cognition and can alleviate depression and anxiety, which is really great. But a cool thing about getting this protein to release in us is that it only requires, according to research, about 20 minutes of exercise a day. And not only that, but it's low to moderate levels of intensity, meaning to get this protein released, to start these neural pathways forming and rewiring, doesn't require an hour a day. It doesn't require dripping in sweat because you're exercising so much. 20 minutes, low to moderate intensity level, and this also reduces the body's inflammatory response. And I just want to demonstrate exactly what I mean, because neuroplasticity can be a challenging subject to understand because we can't see it happening. And so I'm going to scoot back here. And actually, let me do a standing demonstration. Okay, so neuroplasticity. If I'm standing and I'm trying to get stronger so that I can lift my leg, what I need to do in order to lift my leg is practice the movement, the effort, and we'll get more into the specifics later, but I need to practice lifting my leg. So let's say I'm at a point physically now where I go to lift my leg and it does lift. You can see it's lifting, but it's just not lifting very far. It's not lifting too high. What that means is that in order for me to lift my leg, there's a part of my brain that needs to fire. And when it fires, it has to go through all these different neural pathways to go down to my hip. So the message is in my brain, neural pathways go to my hip, it fires there, and I'm able to lift. So if I'm able to lift somewhat, even if it's small, that's telling me that those neural pathways are there and it's working, but they're weakened, likely due to MS. And so the way to strengthen that muscle is through neuroplasticity and functional exercise, which we'll get to in a bit here. But if you go to lift your leg and nothing happens, or very, very, very little, it's not moving up off the ground, then what that might indicate is that this brain, this spot is lighting saying lift your leg, but the neural pathways are getting stuck somewhere. Maybe that neural pathway is working till here, but then there's damage and it can't go any further. So what neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to rewire itself. If it lights up here and this pathway isn't working, then the next repetition that you attempt to lift your leg might go like this and down. And if it didn't work, the next one might do some zigzags and go down. The next one might do some swirlies. There's trillions of different ways, different possibilities of a way to get from point A, which is your brain, to point B, which is the muscle that you're trying to work. Neuroplasticity is the ability of your brain to figure out how to get from point A to point B, even if it looks crazy. And that's why, even if you cannot move anything right now, if you practice with the principles we'll talk about today, even if you see no movement, there is still that possibility of your brain to rewire itself, to get stronger. I know if this is the first time that you're hearing about it, it does sound, I think, too good to be true, but there's so much research showing that this is possible. I have worked with thousands of patients with MS at this point, all different stages of MS, and the majority of them, I never like to say all because MS is different for everyone, but the majority see improvements through neuroplasticity. So let's get into more specifics on how to actually get that to happen. I'm going to look in the chat just to see if you guys have any questions so far. I do see Andrew says, not sure if it's just anxiety, but if we get balance back with exercise, should we go off of a walker or still use it? We actually have a session coming up within the next few months specifically on mobility aids. So this would be a great question for that. Just to quickly answer, the best way to use a mobility aid is to only use it as lightly as possible and not any more than that. So the first step would be keep using the walker, but just don't depend on it as much. Don't put as much body weight through it. Okay. Debbie says, thank you, I'm crying. My body is trying so hard. Yes. Thank you for the reminder and explanation. Yeah. So I've got more reminders and more explanations for you. If there was one thing I could educate on for the rest of my life, it would be neuroplasticity, because it is just that important. So not only do we know from research that neuroplasticity is possible, and I'll show you a video in a second here, but we have MRI proof, evidence that shows that people who exercise or just move consistently have less damage in parts of their brain that show deterioration, so less deterioration than those who don't exercise regularly. Additionally, MRIs show that those who exercise regularly improve faster from relapses, and there's less long-term disability. So how do we activate neuroplasticity? You have this recording, so you can watch this later, you can jot these down. These are the things that we're going to be going into. So let me just click here. There we go. So the first is cardio before strengthening. So neuroplasticity research indicates that doing some aerobic exercise first can prime your brain for neuroplasticity, meaning doing aerobic exercise first can make your brain more likely to create those neural pathways. And I'm actually going to pause here for a second. I really want to show you something because, again, I'm a visual learner. I want to see if I can pull up this video for you. Okay, I'm going to play this a few times. This is a video showing neural pathways. So these are neurons. These are things in our brain. And watching here and here, you'll see the growth in this area. And there's a way to make this happen. And now you're seeing those two are almost attached. And by the end, they're attached. So we started, I'm going to press pause. So look how far apart these neurons, these neural pathways are right at the beginning. And this is a time lapse, but I don't know how long this took, but this doesn't happen overnight. But look how far apart they are. And then if we go to the very end, oh, that's a little too far, a little dark. You'll see how much closer they are. And these are, not to get too technical, but these are dendrites that come off of the neurons. They're touching by the end, meaning that is a new connection. That's what neuroplasticity is. So this is the reason neuroplasticity can be a hard concept to understand, is because we can't see it. We can't feel it happening, we can't see it happening, but if we're looking at imaging of what's happening in our brain, this is what we would see. So cardio before strength, and I'll give you a few examples in a bit here. But for cardio, for aerobic exercise, I like to do upper body so that you don't fatigue your legs. For most of my patients and clients that I work with, they want to get their legs stronger, they want to walk better. And if you fatigue your legs through walking as cardio, or if you go to a gym and you're doing the treadmill or the Stairmaster, your legs are going to be too tired, so you won't be able to get the appropriate strengthening after. So I like to use upper body movements just as a quick example, like forward punches, and go as fast as you can and do that for a few minutes to get your heart rate up. The second thing is focused attention. This means that when you're doing a specific exercise, like lifting your leg, focus on lifting your leg. Don't think about what you're gonna have for dinner later, what you need to get at the grocery store, who you need to call that day. Focus on your leg muscles and activating and lifting the leg. Next is alertness. This kind of goes hand in hand with focused attention, but stay alert. Be very alert of exactly what you're doing, what is the goal, even if you don't see any movement. Another thing that you can do is create urgency or some type of challenge. For example, if you're sitting and trying to lift your leg, maybe you hold your hand an inch or two away from your knee, and your challenge is to try to lift your leg to tap your knee. Or maybe you add some type of urgency. You're trying to get 5 good quality leg lifts within 30 seconds. So creating some urgency can be helpful for neuroplasticity. The next one is novelty, and that just means doing something new or doing the same thing in a new way. One thing that I like to do with my clients is finding a new way to do the same exercise. So if we're talking about lifting your leg again, there in my online program, we have a dance teacher that teaches a seated dance class, and she plays ballroom dancing music, and she's demonstrating what to do. And there are so many marches that she does within that one class, but she doesn't say, okay, let's march our leg. You don't even realize that you're doing the marching exercise because you're focused more on the dance. So that is a new way of doing the same thing. So that's just one example. Or there might be something else that you can do to practice lifting your leg. Maybe it's getting outside and doing something, or maybe it's doing a game. So something new. And then lastly is salience. Make it mean something. If you're exercising just because you feel like it's good for you, and that's really where it ends, you probably won't stay consistent for the long haul. Salience means finding a deep meaning of why this is important to you. Think about what is the end result if you stay consistent. A quick example is I was working with one of my clients, and we were really working on this, because at first when I asked her, why do you want to walk better? And she just said, because I want to be stronger, I want to do more. But after working through and asking her why and why again, every time she gave me an answer, the deeper reasoning was that she wanted to walk better so that she could go trick-or-treating with her son. And then she even went further, and her son at this point was only, I think, 9 years old. Her first thing was so she could go trick-or-treating with her son. And then she said, so that she can walk her son down the aisle at his wedding, not down the aisle, but wherever the men typically go. And then she had said she wants to be able to walk so that she can be part of his life and participate in any activity that he wants to do. How much deeper of a reason is that than because I want to be stronger? So make there be a deep meaning of why you are doing this specific exercise or why you're doing this exercise routine. So someone already asked a few of these great questions, which is, how long does it take? Neuroplasticity is different for every person. There is no set time. I will say, when it comes to timeline, some people, some of my clients that I work with, truly within 2 or 3 days, they're messaging me saying, oh my gosh, Dr. Gretchen, I've been doing this exercise for 2 days or 3 days, and I'm already seeing an improvement. I'm already lifting my toes higher, or I'm already bending my knee more. If that's the case, if that happens for you, what that tells me, if you remember back to that demonstration when I was standing, that tells me that your neural pathways were already there and working, but you likely weren't utilizing them because you were overcompensating in other ways. To no fault of yourself, but your body felt like using that neural pathway was too hard, so it just overcompensated for you. However, if you are someone where you went to lift your leg or do any movement and there was no movement at all, then what that tells me is it's going to take longer. That video that we just watched honestly could have taken years. So if you're at the point where you have no movement or minimal movement, it could, everyone's different. It could take 6 months, it could take 9 months, it could take a year, it could take 2 years or 3 years. So consistency and trust in the process is truly what it takes. Does it matter how old I am is a common question I get. No, it doesn't. Neuroplasticity occurs in all of us regardless of age, but it does take longer the older we get. Does it matter how long I've had MS? No, neuroplasticity occurs in everyone, but for some people, if you have had MS longer and therefore you feel like you have more disability, because just because you've had MS longer doesn't necessarily mean you have more disability. But if those two are combined, it can take longer. It can still happen. You can still see improvements, but it might take longer. Does it matter what type of MS I have? No, but I will say, when it comes to neuroplasticity, all this research, everything I'm telling you, has been shown to be effective for brain lesions. There is little to no research on spinal lesions. With that said, it's been my mission. I've been an MS specialist for 9 years, going on 10 years. And it's been my mission this whole time to find research, talk to neurologists and clinicians and researchers on what their thoughts are on neuroplasticity for spinal lesions. And the consensus is we don't have the research to support it yet, but the thought is, from all these experts that I've been talking to, that they are assuming that the same thing happens. So even if you have spinal lesions and not brain lesions, keep acting as if it is helping, because the thought is it is going to help. We just don't have the research to prove it yet. Okay, so what type of physical therapy or exercise should I do to promote neuroplasticity? You now know some of those basics. That slide that I'd said, what do I do to promote neuroplasticity? I believe there were 6 bullet points. That's the first step. When it comes to exercise, we need to focus on a form of exercise that strengthens your muscles, of course, but also your neural pathways. And that is truly a huge differentiator. If you're someone who has been to physical therapy before and you have felt like maybe you did get stronger, but your walking wasn't any easier, you were likely doing the type of exercise that strengthened your muscles but didn't necessarily strengthen your neural pathways, or you weren't necessarily doing the right type of exercise. So what needs to happen in order for a muscle to move? I was so proud of myself when I created this graphic. Step number 1, your brain needs to fire. Your brain needs to have the thought or the reflex of moving. So for the example of lifting your leg, your brain needs to have the thought of lift your leg. Or it needs to have the reflex, like maybe you stepped on something that was hot or sharp. Then, once you have that thought or reflex, your neural pathways have to kick into high gear. That message of lifting your leg needs to travel all the way down to the muscle that needs to move. That's this step right here. Now, this is the step that's imperative that we strengthen with MS, because this is the step where the issue lies. We'll come back to that in a second. Once these are good and they rewired and the neural pathways are touching and working, then the muscle moves. But a lot of people with MS get exercise wrong, or even physical therapists that don't understand MS, they get exercise wrong because they're focusing just on the muscle. But in reality, with MS, the reason that your muscles aren't working isn't just because they're not working, it's because of these neural pathways, because of the demyelination. So we need to rewire and strengthen this part. That's the type of exercise that you need. And when you do this, your muscles will naturally get stronger. So what type of PT focuses on neural pathways? And before we continue, I'm actually going to look at the chat box just to see if I'm missing anything. There are some questions. Okay, Kenneth is asking, what about a new step as cardio? Yep, a new step can count as cardio, or recumbent bicycle. Yes. Should I stretch before cardio followed by strengthening? That's really going to be dependent on your level of spasticity and muscle tightness. If you feel really tight and that's going to prevent you from doing cardio, then yes, you should stretch before, but stretch the specific muscles that you feel tight, that you feel are tight. Are psionic sleeves helpful? I am a fan of psionic neural sleeves. Everyone's different, but I do think they're helpful. For those that don't know, it's a form of electrical stimulation. So it can be used with this specific device. It can be used just on its own or with exercise. Sometimes I try to do something like push-ups so hard that I end up breathing hard. Would that count as cardio as well as strengthening? Yes, anything that gets your heart rate up counts as cardio. And I love that. Think outside the box, something that won't fatigue your legs. Sometimes it's a hot minute for my muscles to react when my PT asks me to move in a certain way. Is that neuroplasticity? Sometimes it takes a hot minute for my muscles to react. I have some more questions on that. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by it takes a minute for your muscles to react. What do you mean by react? Yeah, that's a little tricky to answer right now without further information. What if the exercises are helping but then goes back or worse than before starting them? Not to before relapse, just high listen steps back. There might be some typos in here or I'm just misunderstanding. But yeah, sometimes it can be normal, absolutely normal, to feel like you're getting stronger and then you take a step back and you're getting a bit weaker, but then you get stronger again, then weaker. That is true even if you don't have MS, but when you have MS, that can be exacerbated. And one question to always ask yourself is there a reason that it might be worsening? Do you have a UTI, an undiagnosed UTI that you didn't even know is happening? Or do you have a cold? Do you have the flu? Are you under a lot of stress? Is there a reason? Because sometimes there is a reason. Other times there might not be, and it might just be the normal trajectory of ups and downs with MS. Does the brain's capacity for neuroplasticity change as MS progresses? So this kind of goes back to the question earlier where, and maybe this was asked before we went over that slide, the brain can, according to research, the brain it's always possible to have neuroplasticity, but as we get older, it might take longer. As a disease progresses, it might take longer, but it's still possible. Can virtual reality or gamified rehab therapies support neuroplasticity in MS treatment? Yes, that would go under, in my opinion, that would go under the novelty area of neuroplasticity, of using games, gamify rehab, virtual reality to get the same movements in, but it feels more fun. You're doing it in a different way. You're shedding a whole new light on exercise, really eye-opening. Good, I'm so glad to hear that. Will recumbent bike for cardio fatigue your legs? Everyone is different. If recumbent bike fatigues your legs and then you can't do your leg strengthening exercises properly, then you should not do the recumbent bike as your cardio. Using the psionic sleeve, does it make you more dependent on it? It depends on how you're using it. Perhaps spasticity calls for stretching before getting into the cardio. Right, so if you have spastic muscles or tight muscles, it depends on what level you have, but if it's preventing you from doing cardio because you're too tight or preventing you from doing your strengthening exercises or balance exercises, then as I mentioned earlier, yes, you would want to stretch before. You could stretch before you exercise, during rest breaks, and after, depending on how tight you are. PT requests like lift your leg or roll onto your side may take longer. Yeah, so that's normal. I would say that is actually a good sign that neuroplasticity is starting and forming. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're telling yourself, lift my leg, lift, 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 and it does lift, but not right away. It's just taking time. What I want you to envision is that video that we just watched of those neural pathways, neurons connecting. It takes time. So it might be that when you tell yourself, or if someone else is telling you, lift your leg, you have to put so much effort in, and it takes time to get from your brain all the way down to your hip flexors or whatever muscle it is. So give yourself that patience. That is okay if it doesn't happen right away. A drop in barometric pressure will cause immediate foot drop. Any suggestions for that? Yes, so this actually goes in alignment with one of our upcoming webinars, which is all about heat or cold intolerance, really any form of temperature changes. For some people, a drop in barometric pressure or an increase in barometric pressure can cause the same type of symptoms as heat intolerance or cold intolerance, even if you don't feel like you're getting hot or cold. So if the drop, therefore it might be getting colder, then you would want to do something to address your core temperature, maybe increasing your core temperature. That's one of the best things. Usually when there's a change in barometric pressure, it's due to a form of heat or cold intolerance. So you'd want to make sure you're increasing or cooling your core temperature appropriately. Love your book, thank you. Will recumbent bike still help if not doing leg exercises that day? Ask me that question again at the end if you feel like we didn't answer it, but I have some thoughts on a recumbent bike that we'll be getting into. I had brain surgery for hydrocephalus, but it didn't help for long. So we were talking about what type of PT to focus on, what type of PT focuses on neural pathways. So the best, maybe I'm biased, but the best is an MS specific physical therapist. The letters you're looking for at the end of the name is MSCS. It stands for Multiple Sclerosis Certified Specialist. So I know the most about this because this is the specialization that I have. The second best is a neurological physical therapist, which is an NCS. It stands for Neurological Certified Specialist. These are going to be your best bets. The reason that I feel an MSCS is best is because the specialization is specifically on MS. Neurological physical therapy, or NCS, is all neurological diseases, not just MS. But they are going to be the next best. They are going to be better than an orthopedic or a traditional physical therapist. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you're feeling like you got stronger, but your day-to-day activities weren't any better or easier, or if you feel like you've been exercising for months, but you're still not any stronger, it's likely that you're doing the wrong type, of physical therapy. You're not focusing on the right types of exercises. So just very quickly, hopefully this is known, but it might not be. Physical therapy can help with so much. So often we just think of PT of helping with strength or balance or maybe stretching, but it can help with aerobic endurance. It can help with spasticity. It can help with fatigue, with walking, depression, quality of life, so much. General physical therapy, and what I mean by that is orthopedic physical therapy. So the type of PT you'd go to after any injury, like an orthopedic injury, if you fell and you hurt yourself, or if you've had surgery and you need to get PT after that, you'd go to an orthopedic PT. The requirements is 6 to 7 years of schooling, ideally your doctorate, but you don't technically have to have your doctorate if you went to school before that was a thing, and pass the boards. The general focus is general strengthening, general balance, and if you're picturing that picture of the Hulk, the general focus is the Hulk, is the strengthening of the muscles, reducing pain for the muscles. They generally push you to the point of fatigue. Exercise examples might be the straight leg raise, side lying leg raise, clamshell, squats, bridges, lunges. If you've been to PT, you know what these are. And it's a big difference from MS specific PT. MS specific PT, same amount of schooling, but it also requires the certification, which takes about a year to meet all of the qualifications to sit for the exam. And then there's the 5-hour exam for that, requires continued education for MS. The focus isn't just the Hulk, but it's the neural pathways as well. We do that through neuroplasticity and functional exercises, and more, how do I want to phrase this? We also focus on compensation. It's about neuroplasticity and neuro recovery, meaning let's get those muscles stronger and let's find new neural pathways to get those muscles stronger, and also being aware that that might take a while. So how can we compensate in the meantime. So you're still strengthening to get those muscles and neural pathways stronger, but you're also using a leg lifter device or some other tools and gadgets to help you in the meantime so that you don't have to wait 9 months, a year, 2 years to actually start moving better. So when we talk about exercise, it all boils down to functional exercise. So we're going to focus on walking for this demonstration that I'm about to do, but please know that what I'm about to do can be done for any goal that you have, any specific activity that you have difficulty doing. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides, but we're going to review this gait cycle. Let me see before I do my demo if there's anything coming in the chat. These are hard to find in New York City, right? Well, I'll talk about that on one of my future slides. Not sure if it's anxiety, but if we get balance back, oh, I already answered that question. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate for you exactly what functional exercise means. So the first thing that you need to do for functional exercise is pick an activity that's hard for you to do, that you want to feel easier. For this demonstration, we're going to go with the example of walking, if you want walking to feel easier. So what functional exercise means is pick your activity and then break it down into as many steps as possible. What I mean by that is, in order for me to just take a step forward, this is what needs to happen. First, I need to be able to shift my body weight forward. Then I need to be able to bend my knee. Then I need to be able to lift my toes up. Then I need to be able to lift my leg, then straighten my leg, then put my heel down first. And all while that was happening, I was standing on one leg. So standing on one leg is the 7th thing. Let me review that, because if this is the first time you've heard it, that may have been a lot at once. Also, just a reminder, you do have the recording to watch this later. So in order to take one step forward, I need to be able to shift my weight forward, then bend my knee, then lift my toes, bring my knee up, straighten my leg, put my heel down, and stand on one leg. And that was just one side. That was just this side. Then I need to do those 7 things on this other side. So that's the second step. First step, pick an activity that you want to be easier or something that's hard for you to do. Second step, break it down into as many components as possible, which is what we just did. Step 3 is pick some of those components as your exercises. So of those movements, if it was really hard for you to shift your weight forward, you feel very unstable, then you could practice this first step as an exercise. You could practice moving forward and back as an exercise. Maybe you try to balance for a few seconds here before moving back, and you do this for 10 repetitions. Or if bending your knee was hard, which for 99% of my patients and clients that I work with, this movement is the hardest movement. If that's hard, hold on to a mobility aid, and you could practice this as an exercise. If it's too hard, there's lots of ways to modify. We have a whole different training on that, but you can modify. So you're picking which components are hard for you to do and doing those as your exercise. Again, if it's too hard, modify. There's lots of ways to modify, but that's what functional exercise means. Define your goal, break it down into components, pick some of those components as your exercise. If you're thinking, all of those are hard for me to do, what do I do if all of them are hard? You could do all of them as exercises, but usually what I like to suggest is narrow it down to just pick 2 or 3. If all of them are hard for you, they're all going to be good. There's no hierarchy of this is the best one and then this. Pick which ones you feel you can do and you can have some success with, even though it's hard, and start there. I usually like to suggest starting with 2 or 3. So someone asked earlier a question around exercise parameters and like how many repetitions or should I exercise daily? So here's what to know. So the current exercise guidelines say, first of all, for neuroplasticity guidelines, everything that we reviewed about neuroplasticity before, I also included it on the next slide in case you wanted them all together. Next up, functional exercise. So that's just what we just reviewed. So what that means, write down a list of all of the activities that are hard for you. Activities in my mind are things like getting out of bed, getting into bed, getting dressed, getting into the shower, getting out of the shower, going to get the mail, getting in and out of a car, climbing stairs, making breakfast. Like all these things are things that potentially might be hard for you to do. Write them all on a list. Of that big long list, what is your top priority? Maybe it's standing up off of a couch because that's hard for you to do, or sitting down without plopping. But pick what is your top priority that you want to feel easier, what is your second top, and just focus on those two, breaking them down into those components and choosing exercises from those components. Next, almost perfect quality. Our brain remembers what we do more of. And so if you have poor quality, meaning if you're trying to lift your leg but it's angling because you're doing it when you're fatigued and it just doesn't look like what it should be looking like, your brain will find a neural pathway for that. It's going to strengthen that neural pathway that looks a little wonky. We want almost perfect quality. We're not going for perfection, but we want it to be the quality that we want when we're moving. So aim for good quality. Quality is most important. Next up is high repetitions. Think of it this way. If you try to lift your leg 5 times in one day, that's 5 times that your brain tried to strengthen that neural pathway or tried to find a new neural pathway. But if you tried 30 times, that's 30 times that your brain is trying to find that neural pathway or strengthen that neural pathway. So the more times you do it, the more repetitions, the more times your brain is trying to find or strengthen those neural pathways. So high repetitions. But next up is they don't have to be all at once. Research shows that exercising throughout the day is just as effective as exercising all at once. Meaning, if you have high fatigue, then you might only be able to do 5 repetitions at once. That's fine. An hour later, try 5 more. 2 hours later, try 5 more. So you can do them throughout the day. When it comes to how many days per week, research shows that 5 to 6 days per week of some exercise is best. There's other research, including from the MS Society, saying that the goal should be 150 minutes of exercise per week. So if you're exercising 5 days, and if you're exercising all at once, that might mean 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week. But you can do, in those 30 minutes, it can be a little in the morning, a little in the afternoon, evening, make it work for you. And then just a quick recap, these were the ways to activate neuroplasticity. I see a question in the comments. Will walking with your walker help with walking independently? Yes, absolutely. Walking with a mobility aid can help with walking independently. That's such a great question because so many people think that if you're using, sorry if you can hear my dogs barking, so many people think that if you're using mobility aid, then your walking's declining. But if you're using it in the right way, and again, we have a session coming up on this in the future, if you're using it in the right way, you're only putting as much weight, body weight through it as you need to, and not any more than that. It can absolutely help you not use a mobility aid or use a lesser mobility aid. Okay, so I think this is my last slide. So how to get access to these types of PTs that we've been talking about. So as someone mentioned earlier, we were talking about MS certified specialist or the NCS, the neuro certified specialist. It unfortunately can be common to not have one of those near you. So what you can do, first and foremost, I suggest calling local PT clinics that you can physically make it to and ask them, do you have an MS certified specialist? No. Do you have a neurologic certified specialist? They might have one of those. So sometimes calling can be the best first step. Other options, the consortium of MS centers, that is the organization where you can get the certification for MS certified specialist. So they might have a resource of someone near you that could be certified. Also, the MS Society Care Partner has a list of people who are MS certified specialists that might be near you. The only thing about those two options is that they aren't all encompassing. In order to be a care partner for the MS Society, you need to work in a facility that meets other requirements. So there might be an MS specialist there, but they didn't meet the other requirements, so they're not going to be on that list. So calling your local clinics, I personally think, is one of the best things that you can do. The American Physical Therapy Association, or APTA, could be something that you try as well. They're not going to have MS certified specialist, but they should have the neurologic certified specialist, and you can search for that. Telehealth physical therapy. So if there is a clinic in your state that you live in that offers telehealth and they have an MS specialist, that's something that you could do. The way that physical therapy licenses work is you can only work with a physical therapist who lives in your state. So it does need to be within your state. And then the missing link, I have lots of different resources. Several of them are free, some are paid. I've got my book behind me. If you did want to learn more from me, the missing link is where I am. So I do see some more questions coming in. We just have a few minutes left to answer some more questions. These are all the places that you can reach me: my email, my website. I've got, again, lots of free resources, my YouTube page, podcast, Instagram, Facebook. I know this is a lot all at once. You can pick the platforms that you're mostly on and find me over there. I see a question that said, oh, yes, thank you. I thought that I mentioned this in this webinar, but I must have taken that slide out. So the question was, will a recumbent bike help for cardio if it fatigues your legs? So my thoughts on recumbent bikes, let me stop sharing this slide. So one thing that's important to consider when it comes to functional exercise is the position that you are in. So what I mean by that is, if your goal is walking, when you're walking, you are in a standing position. Therefore, the most functional position is going to be standing. So standing and bending your knees, standing and lifting your legs, standing balance. So when you're thinking about the bike, the recumbent bicycles, the new step, those are great for cardio, exercise, for even seated leg strengthening. But 9 times out of 10, those bikes will not help with your walking because you're seated. So it will help with seated strength, it will help with cardio, but because you're sitting, when you have MS, your brain doesn't have the same carryover, meaning you could get full strength in your hip flexors, which is the muscle you need to lift your leg. You could get full strength on the bike, but you go to stand up and your hip flexor strength is non-existent. And it's because of that carryover. Your brain understands to use your hip flexors when you're sitting, but not standing. So ideally, you'd want to do your exercises in standing if your goal is walking. If that's too hard, again, we can modify and work your way up to that. But so those are my thoughts on the recumbent bike. If you've ever felt like, I'm getting so strong at the bike, I'm turning up the resistance, I can go longer, but I'm not walking any better. That's why. It's because it's not the most functional position. It can still be part of your program, but you're going to want to also include more functional exercises in functional positions. When it comes to cardio on the new step or recumbent bike, if it's fatiguing your legs, I personally don't think it's worth it. The leg strengthening exercises are more important. So I would get your heart rate up. Someone earlier mentioned push-ups. If you can do push-ups, even wall push-ups, great. If you can just do this really fast for a few minutes and maybe you're talking out loud at the same time, you will feel your heart rate increase. Do something like that with your arms so that you don't have to fatigue your legs. Lori says, thank you, you're welcome. I can't stand on one foot at all. Trying means practicing wobbling, which isn't what I want to practice. So we have another session upcoming on balance, so I'm not going to go too specific on this, but I will say wobbling is normal. It is a normal thing, especially if you're trying to stand on one foot, it's normal to wobble. We want a little bit of wobble. That means that our balance strategies are working. Excessive wobble isn't great. And so there's a way to work on that slowly. Don't just try standing on one leg if you know you're going to be crazy and not be able to keep your balance. Try standing with 95% of your weight on that one leg. The other 5% might be on your other leg, or maybe you're touching something. So work your way up to that. Shelly says, thank you so much. Good. Karen, thoughts on elliptical? Elliptical is more functional than the bike because you're standing and upright. So I do like the elliptical personally more than the bike. The treadmill is the best because it simulates real life walking, especially if you're not holding onto the rails. But the treadmill also can be the hardest. So the elliptical can be a great segue because with the elliptical, you can use your arms to help. You're moving your arms somewhat like you would in a real life situation, but it's helping you move your legs. So the elliptical is a great prerequisite to the treadmill. All right, we wrapped it up in time. We got through all the questions. So yes, these are recorded. Let me share the link with you guys if you are looking for any of our recordings. Sometimes they're up within a week, sometimes they're up within a month. MS Views and News puts them up on their page. I just clicked send to all, so hopefully you got a message on your end with that link. If you didn't, you can just go to their YouTube page and they have a playlist for our Moving with MS series. I try to do New Step for cardio and TRX for strength treadmill I try to do New Step for cardio, TRX for strength, the treadmill and elliptical were too fatigued. Yeah, it's so different for everyone. It's all about listening to what your body can tolerate. The most important thing is do what you can. And I hope you take this in the right way, but lower your expectations. We set such high expectations for ourselves. And if we don't meet those expectations, we feel like we're not doing enough. And in reality, just doing something is truly so much better than doing nothing, even if you're not seeing movements. If you're trying to move a muscle and it's not working, that doesn't mean that your brain isn't working. Your brain is still trying to find or strengthen those neural pathways. So lower your expectations, do something rather than nothing. Do your best, even if that's just a few repetitions. And I think hopefully you'll find that you'll actually see results quicker with that mindset because you're more likely to stay consistent. All right, I don't see any other questions, so we will go ahead and end there. I hope to see you next month. We do a new session on the second Monday of every month. And actually, I can tell you, if I look up quickly, next month's topic is leg strengthening with MS. So we're going to be focusing more on exercises, lots of demonstration, and just information on which leg muscles does MS tend to attack the most. So therefore, which muscles might you want to start strengthening at any point. I see a bunch of people saying thank you. You're welcome. Linda, you are a literal godsend. Thank you for making decisions in your life to be here now. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you, Debbie. I'm glad. It is my honor to spread this awareness and anything that you can do to fill your brain and your toolbox with knowledge of exactly how to get the most out of your exercise. Fatigue is real. You know, get the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to exercise. Do the right things. It'll help you get the results fastest. All right, I'll let you guys go. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for participating in the chat. I love getting feedback in real time from you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will see you next month. Have a good day.